The jokes in the Sermon on the Mount just slay,
So
don't they?
good.
Like, I was just like,
jokes.
oh my gosh.
But male worship leader feminine voice is the worst.
Oh.
You guys all know what I mean.
But when I talk about the dog getting run over at 5 miles an hour, popping like a ketchup packet in the front yard.
Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I'm glad that you are here. We are fresh back from the Practically Pastoring Conference, and it was such a great time. Today's episode, we got some questions from you guys. We're going to talk about what good part-time jobs complement part-time ministry, as well as is it okay to not be funny as a communicator, as a preacher. But before we do that, before we dive into the show, let me introduce you to everybody here. I'm Frank. I'm down in Florida. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeffrey Simpson.
Howdy.
Down in Sumter, South Carolina, we got Delmar P.
Good to be back.
Next to me, completely distracted on his cell phone, we got Andrew Larson.
I'm actually doing ministry here. I'm sorry.
Nice.
I'm sorry.
Oh, pulled the Jesus juke.
Looking
Lies.
very godly with his cool church merch t-shirt, we got Timothy Miller.
Hey.
Merch
I
for
like
your
that.
church?
I like that you have
Pray for you.
sleeves.
That's a change.
Thanks, Jeff.
Got a lot of comments about.
It's a weird thing around here.
We
When
got a
Tim's
lot of
got sleeves.
comments. We got a lot of comments with Tim.
People are going to find you because you wear sleeveless shirts and send you messages and stuff, dude.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Shush.
Hey, we got a great show for you. But before we dive in, Tim, tell us about the great company on your T-shirt.
Yeah, I want to tell you guys a little bit about a fantastic company that we had the privilege of being sponsored by. Church merch for your church. Anything your church needs merch-wise, I'm just telling you, they got you covered. T-shirts, swag bags, coffee mugs, you name it, they got it. Your one-stop shop. You can find them where, Frankie?
At promotionsguy.com/church merch. The link will be in the show notes. Hey, we just had the Practically Pastoring Conference. We'll talk very briefly about that. It was a great time. Guys, anybody want to share like a peak high moment of the conference?
Well,
Hanging out
honestly,
with Ryan from Church Merch / Promotions Guy.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
Like,
he
what
bought the
did he
Airbnb
do?
that I stayed in. He rented the Airbnb for us pastors. So we got to stay up and talk to him till like midnight. The dude is super chill. And I got to hear like how his whole process for making shirts goes and how they actually have them put together in Honduras to like enable people over there to have jobs. This is a really cool thing. But honestly, that and the arcade. The arcade was dope. We rented out the vintage arcade. Tim, was that a you move?
Yeah, that was me.
I'm giving you credit. They had the original
Appreciate
Ninja Turtles, man. It was awesome on the arcade.
Yeah, the arcade was pretty fun. My favorite part of the arcade experience was the slightly less than heated theological debate that I got into. That was nice.
How did I miss
would
that,
say-
Jeff? Like,
I
I
would say it was
completely
on a
missed
simmer.
that.
I don't know. I was just standing there and, somebody started talking and I just started asking provocative questions. You know what I'm saying?
Pick
I just said, oh, hey, that's a cool point. Let me poke a hole in it. And then that was a great conversation. But that's what I enjoy the most about the conference is those kind of conversations where, you can really you're chatting with somebody else who has the similar training and experience and reads the same kind of stuff. And so you don't have to explain every fifth word, or define what terms are that people know. So that's kind of fun.
And it was great because Jeff got to lead worship, even though I only knew one of the songs. It was a great time. It was great.
Sorry,
No,
dude, get with the times.
Wow.
But seriously,
Stop listening to Chris Tomlin only.
Yeah, you're right.
Hey.
I actually
Just the Arriving album on repeat.
Just
So
repeat.
good. So
Yeah.
the highest of highs to the depths of the sea.
That was a great album.
That was an incredible album.
It was a good album.
Every song a banger.
But it's been
In
15 years,
2004.
so-
Yep.
Yeah.
Rotary phones were cool too, but I mean, here we are.
Anyways, it was a super great conference, and we hope to see you next year. We're not going to take 2 years off again. We're going to see you next year at the Practically Pastoring Conference. In the next couple of months, we'll start promoting that. But yeah, it was a great time. We'll hope to see you next year. Hey, so we will dive into today's episode. We got the first question comes from our Facebook group. Great question. At the end of summer, I stepped down from a previous pastoral position due to differences in ecclesiology. I've been working in insurance since then, but recently I've been offered a part-time position at another church in my hometown. I'm hoping my current employer will be willing to let me shift to part-time work. If he doesn't, I will need to find another job to supplement our income. My wife stays home with the kids, homeschooling them. What part-time jobs have you done or recommended that complement ministry well? I'm going to jump in first. I wouldn't do this. And here's what
Yeah,
here's
I
what
was
I mean
going to
by
say the
this.
same thing.
I would actually change your mindset real quick. So, like, I don't know what the church is demanding you from the youth ministry position in terms of like how many hours they're expecting. However, I wouldn't leave your full-time position.
Where are you seeing youth ministry?
Yeah, I didn't see that either.
Okay,
No,
I'm sorry. Whatever the
just
ministry
made that up.
position is.
I mean, let's be real. If it's a part-time position, it's probably a youth ministry.
True.
You could
Or
probably
it's a
make it
job.
full-time and do youth and worship, you know?
Yeah. Or it's a job in Arkansas
That's
where
the
they're expected
combo.
to change the toilet paper. That's true. No. Okay, sorry. I mean, I don't know what this position is specifically, right? It doesn't say youth ministry, but it's just part-time position. I was assuming youth ministry. If it might be like lead pastor position or an associate position. But if there is a world where this church can be flexible with their hours for you, and you can stay full-time in your insurance position, I would recommend that only because odds are your insurance position is giving you health insurance, and it's probably going to give you better health insurance than whatever you can find in the marketplace. And yeah, like having 1.5 jobs isn't ideal, but like if you can't make your ministry position a full-time position yet, I wouldn't mess around with your insurance job just because it might be more of a pay cut and more of you'll be losing more things doing that.
Two half-time jobs very rarely equal a full-time job.
Right.
Indeed.
So
Especially when one is ministry.
yeah, that's like barely a half-time. Now it's more than half-time hours, but it's not going to be half-time pay.
Right.
So if anything, hey church, I can do this at night. I can do this on Saturday and Sunday, but 9 to 5 during the week is going to be a little bit tough. Or if I can be flexible, that's fine. But yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, we've had episodes about this before, and the guys can chime in about like good side hustles for pastors, and we'll talk about that in a second. But like, I just think that like, as opposed to you saying, hey, to my church, let me go part-time. Sorry, to your insurance job, let me go part-time. I there's probably a heart here that like I want to give so much to the church, and yeah, I get it. And you want to, and like if you can go full time in the church eventually, then like leave your insurance job and then go full time. But I would actually encourage you, and I know a lot of pastors who do this, who are full time in a job in the marketplace, and then they'll like hustle. Now you have to like talk to your spouse and make sure like you're okay with the boundaries and the hours you have to set up. But like, yeah, I wouldn't try to find a part-time job because of your ministry position. Guys, what else? What are your thoughts?
I'm not opposed to a good side hustle. You guys know that's a supplementary income's been pretty critical for the Miller family for quite a few years. There's multiple ways you can do this, but you're going to have to contextualize it to where you're at. One thing that's pretty universal for all pastors is you probably have local funeral homes. If you didn't know this, not every family that comes to a funeral home has a pastor. So what funeral homes
Probably why they're going to a funeral home and not the church.
So what funeral homes will often do is they have what you call rent-a-pastors, and they're just local guys who they rent out, and it's usually for a fee. It's always for a fee. I have heard quite a few of these rent-a-pastors. I'm usually pretty disappointed because of the lack of God, Jesus, the Bible, and the gospel. So I would say there's a pretty serious need for faithful expositors of the word to be in these locations. So I would go to area funeral directors, let them know who you are and that you are willing to be on that on-call list to come in and do funerals. Also, weddings.
Yeah.
I've been getting an increase in weddings from people not at my church. So it's a separate process that I do with people that are not members. It's a shorter process. Not every wedding I do is necessarily a wedding between two believers. Sometimes they might both be non-believers, or I'm not sure where they're at, but I still spend time with them.
Or two men.
I have not done any same-sex marriages.
Okay.
He would lose his ministry license in
That
the
I have
church.
not done.
And
but
probably practically pastoring standing.
Yes, but I don't
For
know
sure.
that it's. I mean, if I have an opportunity to share the gospel, and everyone, like every wedding I've done, they know I'm going to talk about Jesus. Like we're gonna talk about the gospel, and they've been very okay with that, even if they're not avid churchgoers. So I think weddings and funerals are two areas that you could potentially make a side income on. I don't know if it's going to be enough to supplement what you need, though.
Could you talk a little bit about the live streaming?
I would
thing
say
you do?
like both. We also have Dell and Tim who are doing weddings and funerals that are not necessarily officiating the weddings and the
Correct.
funerals that they're
Right.
doing. And
Correct.
it's sad that there's way more money in not being the officiant.
Oh,
Yeah.
way
No,
more.
there-
way
more money, but there's a technical skill involved, and if you have that skill, by all means use it. I live stream funerals on the side. Not very difficult, but you have to know what you're doing in order to do it. Thought it was going to phase out after COVID, but it just ramped up, and people still enjoy the live stream option because not everybody can fly from all over the world to attend your funeral. However, if you offer them a link to a YouTube feed, they're more than willing to do that. So there are ways to supplement the income without hurting your schedule too much.
You know, kind of to piggyback off a little bit what you're saying, if we're talking about things that are compatible in ministers' lives, whether you got a full-time ministry job or part-time ministry job, I'm just going to say I think the entrepreneur route is the best route to go because you're setting your own hours. You could determine what you want to take and what you don't want to take. If you go and you get a job working for someone else, they're going to have more control over your life, which is going to impede on the ministry. I mean, like we said, I film weddings and I film different events around town, but I'm available to say no to it.
I was waiting for Dell to talk about leather crafting. Anyway,
I haven't made money off of that yet, or watches.
I was hoping you
but,
would. Yeah,
But that's the thing. But that's kind of you kind of proving the point. You start an interest, it becomes a side hustle, and what ends up happening is you're able to make money. And I'll be honest, a side hustle is a great ministry tool for pastors because I know pastors and probably some people listening right now. You might be in a ministry position and you're like, I don't need to be at this church. This church is not good for me, but I'm bound here because I need the paycheck and I have kids. Well, if you have a way to make money on the side, you're never bound by a ministry. Not that you should anyways, but we're all human. You know what I'm getting at. Like if you can able to make a little bit of money on the side, you can make more important, difficult decisions as a pastor because you don't need that money as much.
Yeah, I think depending on your stage of life and like, do you have kids in the house or not? I see wife stays home with the kids, homeschooling them. Another option is, athletics can be a great option for you. You could, if you have a skill at a sport, you could go to, I'm thinking baseball in particular. I've actually thought about this a number of times. You could become like a hitting instructor at a batting cage. You can train yourself to do that, or if you have the skill already. For little kids, you can offer private lessons, usually at a batting facility, depending on where you live. There might be an indoor place or any other sport. And then, of course, guaranteed, unless you're like in Texas or some other state with really big sports programs, there's probably a high school nearby you that needs a couple coaches. And you literally, I probably could coach year round if I wanted to, and just coach a sport in the fall, a sport in the spring, and a sport in the winter. That's an extra few grand a year, and it's only a few hours a day. But if it's something like that, that can be also a really, really great into the community because you're gonna know a bunch of kids and a bunch of their families, and we've seen some crossover with that. Where I've got guys that show up at church once in a while now, and it's pretty crazy when you see those worlds collide. It's pretty fun, so that could be another option. Obviously, I'm going to echo what everybody said about entrepreneurial type of stuff, but you've also got like the gig economy stuff where you can do if you want to deliver food or you want to all those kind of things where you can set your own hours are really helpful.
Yeah.
But I think I would echo what Frank said first is like change your mindset about immediately jumping on this. Also, he didn't really talk about this, but just because you've been offered a position at another church in your hometown, I would slow down. I mean, if you already left the church due to differences in ecclesiology, you might want to really slow down and ask some questions about it because what you don't want to do is in 5 years have a resume that says this guy only stays at churches for a little while because of ecclesiology issues.
Man, that's a good point, bro.
So I would just caution you against just because a church offered you a job doesn't mean you should take it. You really want to make sure that it's a good move for you, that you're kind of in alignment theologically and apparently with ecclesiology before you're taking another job. Also, I mean, I'm reading way into this, but I would be very cautious about a church that's like, hey, we're going to offer you a part-time position, but then it'll turn full-time down the road. Man, don't do it.
Because
it
what you
rare-
do
it's-
is you end up doing full-time work for part-time pay.
Yep.
And then why would they? It's kind of like the argument,
Yeah.
when like in high school when you tell the girls not to put out, hey, why would they ever buy the cow when they get the milk for free?
What?
It's the same for pastors. It's the exact same
Is this
thing.
That's where
Listen.
Andrew goes.
Listen, Andrew's
just
been
saying-
Why
doing
would-
youth group for like 3 years now. Is that what you preach?
No, it's mostly middle schoolers, but
Okay.
I had this conversation when Dylan was working for me. He was like, I can do so much more. I can do this. I'm like, yeah, you could do that, but I know what we're paying you. Why would the church ever say we need to step up and pay you a full-time salary when we're getting full-time results out of you
Yeah,
right
and they'll
now?
do that without being conscious of it. They're not
No,
trying to be
and
malicious.
they'll play the spiritual card, and
Yep.
it's this is your act of service, but it's a different.
And
I think
you
that's
a
can
different
get
thing.
stuck in like doing, 3/4 worth or 9/10 worth of a full-time job and getting paid half of it, because you'll just get stuck there, because for you it's like you have this kind of security blanket a little bit and you feel like a calling to it, and everything just gets weird in that situation, especially if this is like, hey, come work part-time for us, and when the senior pastor retires you'll be the guy. Do not do that
Oh yeah.
under no
Everything about that.
circumstances.
And the problem is when you're working that much and not getting compensated, like I said, it's not about the money, but at the same time, there is a level of
Burnout's gonna
burnout
happen.
risk. Yeah, you just read my mind. And then also to throw a little bit more caution to the wind, because I know me and Tim and some of you guys, y'all have done the side hustle stuff, and it's really cool to talk about it once you're fully in the space. But one thing we often overlook is telling you how many thousands of dollars it costs to start that up. Okay.
Yeah.
So like for us just to say, go be an entrepreneur, man, like my video business, you're talking like 15 grand to like get it started, so that's a considerable amount of money as well. So unless you just got
there
that
are
laying
options
around.
to get into the side income.
Yes, that are cheaper.
I mean, I would say you could even get your name on a sub list for schools in the area. Christian schools
Yeah.
are always in need of subs, and then you can say yes or no as needed. And it's usually, I don't know what the going rate is, but typically for us around here, it's like $100 to $120 a day.
You
which
could rob
isn't
Best Buy. I mean, there's all kinds of
True.
options.
Oh my
Lots of
gosh.
It's a very Baltimore contextual job.
Rob-
For sure.
One thing, what we were just talking about, I think is a true principle for any part-time work in any job is like you're going to have to put your own boundaries on your own limitations, because the place of employment won't do that for you.
Right.
And like the sad thing is like this is like probably the worst in churches, because I mean we already expect, the churches expect a lot from volunteers.
Yeah.
So if we're paying you and you're willing to give us full-time effort for a part-time position, like I hope.
Well, that's just good for the budget. Why wouldn't
Yeah. I mean, I hope
We'd be poor stewards to pay him what he's worth.
all five of us hope that like as we have people under us as employees, that if they're part-time, we're going to be good stewards of their time and like care for them. But man, it's so easy to just let the ministry slip away from you and then like have them work 40 hours of work for 20 hours a week, right? And so
Yeah.
like if you're listening to this and you are in part-time, like practice saying no and practice saying, and just like being honest. It's like, I'm part-time. Like I really respect, like love the staff at our church that are part-time.
There you go.
That are like, I only have so many hours, and we respect that. We're like, you're right. Don't do more than what you can do in that
Absolutely.
part-time. But also don't be lazy in that part-time. But anyways, Dr. Andrew, tell us about, and I want you to be honest, like I feel like this is all public information too. The benefits of adjunct professing. Is that a word? Professing? Is that the word?
Professoring,
Professoring.
teaching. So
Andrew can make up words because he got a PhD, right? So
Yeah.
He
can
has
do
the
that.
ability.
I started to teach at Liberty University shortly after I finished, partially because of this. There's a lot of online students at Liberty, and I had to have some conversations into a camera, and I had a department chair say, wow, you have the setup to present yourself really well online. And that's not something that a lot of our adjuncts do. And so it started with one class and now has grown to several classes and a subject matter expert, which is one of the things that they do at Liberty since it's such a big school. But when at first it was like, man, this is awesome. This is going to look so cool on a resume, and it's the biggest Christian university on the planet. And then about a week after that, I was like, oh, this is actual work. This is not I'm going to put my stamp of approval on something, but it takes time and energy, and it's a difficult position to get into. Liberty Specific is wonderful because it's online, but most pastors or people in ministry, if you have any kind of advanced degree, there is a field that you can teach in. If you want to jump over to the local community college, I don't know where you live, but just about every community college is desperate for adjunct professors because adjuncts are way cheaper than full-time professors. And the way that works, I think the going rate in the US is about $800 a credit hour. And so, it's
Is that for like to teach undergrad?
for undergrad. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you find the community college, here, our local community college has like a world religions course. They actually had an Old and New Testament survey course in our course catalog at the community college. It's offered sometimes. So there's like 3 or 4 classes where they kind of need someone with a theology degree, at least at master's level or higher, to teach at the community college. And you look at the roster and it's almost exclusively pastors that are filling that role. And then there's some ethics classes that most seminary degrees give you the credit hours that you need to be able to teach an ethics class at the undergrad level. So I have served under pastors that they had a class like 3 or 4 nights a week that they were teaching at the community college, which really came in and supplemented the income. So if you are connected to a Christian university system, then reach out to an alumni network. Hey, here's, you know my work. I've done this. What do you think? But also reach out to your local community college because you have no idea what skill sets we have in ministry that translate into academia. I mean, just in general, ministers are probably better in front of a classroom than an engineer would be in front of a classroom. So we shouldn't be teaching engineering classes. That would be a disaster. But whether it's communications classes, like I said, ethics, and most liberal arts programs have some kind of religion courses. And at the university or college level, you don't have to be as apolitical as you do if you are like teaching. If you're subbing at a public high school, you cannot be proclaiming your faith as boldly. At the college level, part of what they want is the debate in the classroom. So, hey, I am an evangelical. Here's my perspective. Let's talk about it. Is not something shied away from in most college classrooms. So it has been kind of a game changer for me and my family. And
well, about how many hours? I know you say
too many right now
because you said it's actual work. And if you know Dr. Larson, he is the king of kind of getting around having to do too much at one time. So
Yes,
if Dr. Larson says it's actual work, then I'm believing that it's actual work.
So
are you just staying up a little later?
I stay up typically. And what stinks is I'm someone who I work on a deadline, and that's kind of my thing. So I'm teaching 3 courses right now. All of my undergrad work is due Sunday at midnight, and all of my undergrad work is due Monday at midnight, and all of my graduate work is due Sunday night at midnight. And so the rule at Liberty is the grades need to be posted 6 days after it was due, which means my grades are due Saturday night and Sunday night, which is not great for my rhythm as someone who's preaching on Sunday.
Sunday night's not terrible. Saturday night's bad.
Yeah. So there are some weeks that I lock myself in a coffee shop for all day Friday and get as much stuff out as possible. And that makes it a little bit easier. With some of the bigger schools, it's way more grading than it is lecturing. I think online education has evolved a lot in the past 10 years or so. When I was in seminary, my online classes were you need to watch 3 hours of lecture a week before you even touch the coursework. That's not what they're doing now in most online education. So there's not a lot of lecturing. There's a lot of interaction with students. I probably send 15 or 20 emails a day between the 3 courses that I'm teaching. And then it probably works out to maybe like 10 hours a week right now of, locked in front of the laptop, dedicated time.
It's a pretty decent part.
So it pays better than it pays better than any other 10-hour week part-time job. For sure. That is for sure.
And you're teaching 2 undergrad courses?
No, I'm teaching 1 undergrad
and 2
course
masters.
And 2 master's classes, both in youth ministry.
And the master's classes, you don't have to give me the numbers, but the master's classes pay more than the undergrad.
And this is pretty standard across. My father is a retired professor, so this is a conversation that's had at my house all the time. So I don't think it's gatekeeping. It's not a secret.
Sure.
So $800 per credit hour is kind of standard for adjunct anywhere in. So at Liberty, if you get hired as an undergrad adjunct with a 30-hour MA, but you're specialized in whatever field, or you're a PhD and 15 years as a pastor, you're still getting paid the same adjunct rate. But if you're teaching a master's level course, you typically get paid for 4 credit hours to teach a 3 credit hour class, because if an undergrad class, you turn in a 3-page paper, the master's class, you turn in a 10-page paper. So there's more reading, more grading, a little bit more work per student. It's more work per student, but then there's less students in the master's classes, at least in the ones that I'm teaching. And then if you have a terminal degree and you're teaching doctoral level classes, then you get paid for 5 load hours for a 3 credit hour class.
Okay, this got really granular, but
I love it.
You've said this, and again, you don't have to give me a real number.
That's
but
none of it's a secret, and that's like you could Google all of this, and Liberty stuff would tell you. So there's nothing.
But anecdotally, you're getting paid more just from this part-time position than you did when you first started doing student ministry.
Oh, yes, because assuming this carries out through a year, I haven't done it for a whole school year, so we'll see what happens over the summers. I got hired last January, and then you go through a kind of long training process. So I had my first class in August. So Liberty has half semesters, which means you get paid twice as often.
Yeah.
And so if a full 3 credit hour class is only 8 weeks, it's more work during those 8 weeks, but that's kind of nice too.
Yeah, I mean,
so I did 1 class from August to October, 2 undergrad classes in October to December, and then they asked me to move some of my attention to graduate level youth ministry courses, and those classes are less full. I think I have.
So is it almost like more like an intensive, where it's like the same work in less time?
It's the same work as
it's
if
not
you were
like a
on
week
campus.
Intensive, but
no. But if you were on campus at Liberty, it would be a 15-week long class. But online, it is an 8-week long class.
Got it. But you get it's same work, same 3 credit
hours.
Yeah.
So you.
Nice.
Whereas if you were on campus and you were taking 15 classes, they suggest that you take 2 classes at a time. 2 classes at a time is considered full time for students in the 8-week semester. So you do, but then you have 6 semesters throughout the school year. So you can actually get done a little bit faster than if you were just doing 30 credit hours per school year.
I think more of the story is
I might need to take some classes with you.
If you have a master's level degree, like an MDiv or a master's degree.
But yeah, an MDiv and an MA or MDiv.
Yeah, you can teach an undergrad program at probably as an adjunct somewhere.
Go to your community college.
Yeah. And that's, I like the community college aspect of it, because then you can kind of double dip there. You can have your side hustle, have your part-time job, but also make some tangible relationships with people in the community like we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So that's good. Hey, let's dive into our next question here. This is from Reddit. The title of it is "I'm Not a Funny Preacher." So he says, "Yo, so hear me out. I'm a funny guy."
He starts with "yo," which is fantastic for me.
Yeah.
Sounds funny to me.
I'm reading it. Yeah. "I like to joke and laugh and have fun, just not in the pulpit. Or I should rephrase and say, I'm just not funny in the pulpit. My jokes do not land, so I don't do them anymore. I'm a pretty expository academic preacher too, so I wonder if jokes just don't fly with my style of preaching. I have a pastor friend that has a pretty large church in our area, 700-800 people, that this guy puts in jokes in his PowerPoints, riffs off the audience, and just overall is a charismatic, funny guy in the pulpit. I'm comparing myself to him a little bit, but I'm also wondering if everyone else is as comfortable with joking from the pulpit, or if I'm just the odd one out. I'm not dead in the pulpit, but I just don't plan jokes or laugh that much. Is that a bad thing? And on a theological note, for fun, should sermons be serious since we are communicating God's word for us today, or is it okay to be more lighthearted?" All right, guys, what do you think?
Well, all the Sermon of the Mount, the jokes in the Sermon of the Mount just slay,
so
don't they?
good.
Like, I was just like, oh my gosh. I can barely make it through it, y'all.
The poor in spirit, that's hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
Andrew and I talk about this all the time. There's oftentimes a lack of self-awareness in people in ministry, which is unfortunate. So what I love about this is you kind of know where you're at. Like, there's an awareness that you're not all that funny from the pulpit. There's nothing wrong with that.
Then don't try. But trying to be funny.
What's
from
that
the
like?
Is terrible.
See, funny guy.
See, Yeah, I think if you, be you, don't
Yeah.
try to be your buddy down the street. I am a fairly funny guy in the pulpit, not trying to pat myself on the back, but in general it's very conversational. But what I find is that the jokes that I write into my manuscript are rarely as funny as something that is said off the cuff. So trying to be funny and being funny are not the same things. I remember my Grams, she died in 2014. But when I changed majors and I was like pursuing ministry vocationally, so my junior or senior year of college, she bought me this really nice NKJV Johnny Mac study Bible that I have over in my office. And she sat me down and she's like, I'm so proud of you. I want you to have this. There's one thing I need you to know. No one wants a funny preacher.
Oof.
I know you're kind of a silly guy, but don't try to be funny when you're preaching. And I was like, first of all, Grams, I'm going to be a youth pastor till I'm 90, so don't worry about it. But my wife and I laugh about that all the time because she went to the kind of churches where it was somber and the top button was buttoned up, and that's not me. And you have to be who God has wired you to be in the pulpit, or you look like you're faking it. People can smell that.
For sure. There's also a benefit to multiple services here. If you have a joke lined up that does not land well in an early service, it's so easy to just remove
Get
for
rid of
a
it.
later service. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't think, you know what, it was them.
It was not them.
I think the self-awareness thing is huge here, though. I love that you can acknowledge that you're just not that funny while preaching, even though you're kind of a lighthearted dude outside the pulpit. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being lighthearted from time to time from the pulpit either. I think there are very weighty passages where, man, sometimes we need a little bit of a breather in between some heavyweight points. That's okay to have something that fits, but if it doesn't fit the sermon and it's only taking away, it doesn't add to, then you have to be really careful with just trying to be the stand-up comedian preacher guy, because those exist too.
I heard it said that preaching is God's truth wrapped in man's personality. And that was really helpful for me because it was like, you know what? If this lends to my personality here and the humor that I have, okay, fine. But you don't have to be. And I think, he says he's pretty clear at expositing. If you're expositing the text and preaching straight through it, there are definitely passages in Scripture that lend towards humor. You know what I'm saying? Like the Bible is laced with irony, and things that if you were really just to shine a light on that, you don't even have to try to be funny. The text itself is laughing,
I was in Numbers 21 yesterday, and the whole Israelite assembly went to Mount Hor. Come on.
Oh, my gosh.
How is that not funny?
Middle school Andrew had it again.
Did you really?
Our soundboard and live stream is like run by middle schoolers and high schoolers. So I looked specifically over at them as I was reading that text, and they were dying. It was fantastic.
Oh, my gosh.
There's some things that are just funny.
Well, and then you have the other end of the spectrum of the guys who say you should never be funny, and those guys end up on the IFB Twitter clips, and we're laughing at them because it's quite embarrassingly funny,
but not because they meant us to.
Exactly.
I like to. I don't plan any jokes. Once in a while, if something is just too good, I'll just put a little note. But most of the time, it's off the cuff stuff, and sometimes, frankly, I get a little close to the edge. If I'm getting a little too comfortable,
sometimes a little too close to the sun.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, whoa, gotta bring it back a little bit. But most of the joking that I do is typically coming from a conversation I had with somebody that week, or something that relates to something, and so it's almost like an inside joke, but then everybody kind of is in on it. But especially if that person is there, sometimes I'll see a person in the congregation and a memory will pop into my head in the moment, and I've gotten comfortable enough that I'll usually go for it. Sometimes, though, you can be a little bit as you're saying it, this might be a mistake. Yesterday, I did something funny where, we use, this is more worship related, but we use multi-track. So we have the click and the guide in our ear. And there was one song that the guy said, "Turn Around," which is the name of a part of a song. And I turned around and looked at the drummer in the middle of the song, kind of got him to break a little bit. And then we just kept playing. But that's the kind of that's just my personality, though. And I think I would echo, if it's not your personality if it's not working in the pulpit, it's not working in the pulpit. Don't worry about it. Because really, I don't want to be known as a funny preacher. I want people to not really remember me as a preacher, just to remember the stuff I said, if it's helping them get closer to Jesus. So, I'm fine with being known as a jovial guy out of the pulpit. And if that leaks into the pulpit a little bit, that's cool. But like, my goal is not to be a funny preacher.
I would also say that if your humor is more sarcastic in tone, which mine is,
be careful.
It's better to make fun of yourself. Like if you
be self-deprecating.
you have a chance to make fun of yourself, that's great. Just be careful, like with your level of sarcasm. I've gotten myself into trouble with making fun of other faiths and religions, like in a very joking, like not super mean, but someone reached out and was like, hey, actually, I come from that. That string, and that was pretty offensive. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't like see it like that, and I'm really sorry.
I think when we're talking about the personalities, Tim is my closest buddy in ministry in the world. We are very, very close. We're very, very different. He is an intense person. I don't think anyone has ever called me intense ever in my life. So I always tease Tim about like the way that he yells when he preaches. He doesn't yell, but
Frank got heated yesterday, bro.
I could see that. But so I'm saying like there's a way that if Tim and I are watching a football game, he might yell, scream, and take his shirt off, and he preaches like that too. Shirt usually stays on, but so it's
usually Sunday.
Wow,
but when I say, oh, you're yelling, that's kind of how you talk. You are an intense person, and how you talk should come through in how you preach. I don't know if you've ever known someone who like turned on a preacher voice and it was completely different than their regular voice. I don't know that there's anything more off-putting than that.
It's the worst.
Yeah, there is. Worship leader voice. That's
worse. That is worse.
How about on-stage voice? Like if you're on stage and your voice changes.
But male worship leader feminine voice is the worst. You guys all know what I mean.
Jeff wins. Yeah, he
okay. Yeah. Yep. We'll give you that.
Hey, church, don't do that.
I do write jokes in my sermons, but in my editing process, I remove like 80% of them. I kind of like Jeff talked about this. He's sometimes I'll write a joke and then I'll be like, gotta pull it out. And oftentimes, if I'm like running on time, my jokes are often like anecdotal or just like to like kind of punch up the point. They're not like there's not like a point to it. So I will oftentimes. What's it called? I will oftentimes remove.
This is a great
jokes.
example of how non-planned jokes can go in the pulpit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Frank, you also you sent your manuscript over to several people in leadership last week. Me, our worship leader, one of our elders got it, and you actually said, "Hey, I've got some jokes in here. Could you let me know if they're too offensive or if you think they'll land well?" I don't know Lakeview people as well just yet.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really smart. I laughed at all of them. I don't know if you got different feedback, but I was like, "This is hilarious. Keep these in here."
The feedback I got from you is the same feedback I got from everyone I sent it to.
When you danced and did the hand motions for Waves of Mercy, was that it?
It was that song.
Did he really?
It was you came from heaven to earth too.
Oh, he actually danced on stage, and it was
Dude
one of the
move,
funniest
though.
moments
Dude
in
can
the
move.
pulpit that we've had in a long time.
He can move, but he can't sing.
I can't say.
So that,
okay.
Which makes
I only was talking about moving.
So, you kind of bring out a good point. Everybody's got a different way they bring levity to the pulpit. Like for me, if you were to look at my manuscript, I use a very, very heavy outline, so anyone could probably take it and run with it.
Uh-oh.
But most of my levity is found in the stories I tell because I'm a storyteller. So right here, it would just say, story of your dog dying. What you don't realize is that story is hilarious. And like my mother-in-law ran over my Maltese going 5 miles an hour in the front yard with my kids in her car, showing them the Christmas lights.
Nice.
And I shared that story to the church in the most serious tone. But when I talk about the dog getting run over at 5 miles an hour, popping like a ketchup packet in the front yard, people are going to it's bad. They're laughing and they feel bad that they're laughing.
They're animal lovers in my congregation.
So that's the thing. The animal lovers. Yes, that's what happened to little Harley in the front yard at Christmas. But that's the thing. Okay, so that's I didn't share it to that degree. But the point is, animal lovers are even laughing at this story, which I'm telling in a serious way, knowing that it's being received as humor. Does that make sense? Like
Yes.
that's the
Not
whole
at all.
point.
But anyway,
But-
go ahead.
But
yeah,
no,
it does.
If I was critiquing your sermon, I would say, do not say popped like a ketchup bag. That is
No,
Or-
I didn't say that. But the way it came out. But that's the thing. When I'm sharing the story,
The way the
this is
ketchup came out.
oh gosh, well it did. I mean, it was pretty bad. But the point I'm making,
Oh my God.
the point I'm making is your humor is going to come out in your way. When you look at the pastor down the street and you try to mimic his voice, it is not going to land. Like there are some pastors who can say snarky stuff. Like Jeff can say some pretty snarky stuff, but because of your tone and the way you deliver it, it's funny. If I deliver it, I come across like a jerk. You understand?
Yeah.
So for me, my humor comes through when I'm telling stories, because I could tell a story that someone would tell and they'd be like, that doesn't land. But for me, I know that that's how God gifted me to put that in there. So what I'm trying to communicate is like, when you're sharing the things, if you're putting like humor in your sermon, it's got to be in your own voice. You can't just take someone else's stuff. You don't do that in the comedy world. That's how you get canceled. And you don't do it
Listen,
in pastor
if you're-
world either.
If you're gonna
Goes back to
share
what Tim was saying
animal,
about self-awareness.
if you're gonna share
You
animal
gotta know
death
yourself.
stories, you got to be gutsy. You know what I mean?
All right. On that note, be yourself. If you're not naturally funny, don't add jokes to your sermon. But like,
Pop the
you know.
ketchup. That's what we're saying.
All right, moving on. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. Please leave a review, not based on the last 5 minutes of this episode, but on the totality of our
Oh my
podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this show. We will see you next week, same time, same place. I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm in the market for a new dog.
Oh, no.
You can have the one that we just got. I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is Practically Pastoring. See you next week. Bye.